And playing the intro. All right, here we go. And 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Good morning. Good morning. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for listening to our show and supporting our show each week. Don't forget that you can join us on YouTube under Nathaniel Lee, Legal Issues of the Day, also on Facebook and on various stations. And so we will try to populate that on our, if you type in my Facebook, we'll start advertising on the Facebook under Nathaniel Lee Attorney, and you'll be able to follow our shows. Today, we got some important issues that we must cover. But before I get started, locally, we're having our election this week. And I'm so proud of the number of people that's showing up to vote. It looked like a couple of weeks ago, we were like 1% of the voters have turned out. Now the numbers are getting better, particularly here in Pike Township, my hometown. And I discovered I'm on the ballot again for precinct committee person. I've been that for the last 20 plus years. So don't forget to look me up and vote for me, Nathaniel Lee. I'll continue to work on your behalf. But if you find somebody else you think will do a better job, vote for them. But in any event, but I want you to get out and vote. The next issue has to do with, we've had some historical things that occurred in our city, in our state. We have this proliferation of crime. You know, every day I get tired of waking up and somebody is shot. And I look in different cities across America, same thing. And I think that we have to do better in each of our communities. And so we each have an obligation to try to curtail the spread of violence, particularly that's hitting our community. So I'm calling each and every one of you, if you see something, say something. And if we could save some life, I'm on the air now, you have to call in. And so if you have to say something to prevent tragedies from occurring. Now, having said that, we had an issue that hit our local news that dealt with foreign medical procedure. And the caller, she was trying to call in and on my private line and got cut off. But anyway, hope she calls back. But essentially what happened is we have a number of folks in our country that goes to foreign countries to have medical procedures performed. Medical procedures in the United States, I think that in our country, folks, I think that we have the best medical care in the whole world, bar none. But because people see advertised rates in foreign countries that are cheaper, they decide to take advantage of this. And we've had a number of tragedies that occurs because of these foreign medical procedures. I urge each and every one of you, if you are trying to get a foreign medical procedure, forget about it. It's a bad idea because we don't have the same medical care in foreign countries that we have in the United States of America. Don't forget that. In America, in order for people to perform medical procedures, they have to go to a rigorous medical school, they have to pass a rigorous test and examination, then they have residency. So they have to demonstrate that they have the requisite skills to practice medicine in that area. That's not the same standard in every country. And most people don't realize that until it's too late. And we've had tragedy occur time and time again because people see something advertised and not realize that that may be a life-altering decision. Forget about doing foreign medical procedure. Forget about it. It's a bad idea. So even if they were to produce, let our caller come on the phone real quickly. Okay, caller, you have a question for or comment for Legal Talk Show today. What's your comment? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Caller, what's your question or comment today?
My question, and I think you were just discussing it, is whether or not there is any legal remedy for the families of people who are going to these foreign countries like the Dominican Republic and seeking medical help, cosmetic surgery specifically, and are dying or being medically tragically losing their lives or having life-threatening illnesses as a result of getting these procedures.
And now, caller, what state are you calling from?
I'm calling from Tennessee.
Yeah, now here's the way it works. Dominican Republic does have civil tort laws, but most people don't understand that the United States, we are the most advanced tort system in the whole world. We have the 7th Amendment to give you a right to jury trial. We are one of the few countries that have that right. The second thing is that our tort system is second to none. Foreign countries don't have that. Dominican system, I did some research on this issue because we had a tragic death of a young lady out of Indianapolis who went to the Dominican, had a surgical procedure. And I wanted to find out what are the damages. And I wasn't surprised, but the typical damages that was reported that I was able to find doing my research showed that the typical death case pays 2 million pesos. And that sounds extravagant, but 2 million pesos is today is like $30,130 for a death case. But it's a foreign country, so you have to get a foreign lawyer who speaks the language. In the Dominican, they're procedure bound, so you have to get a lawyer in the Dominican who's trained in the Dominican to actually do the case. And we contact lawyers, we vet them to try to find out who would be the best outcome. But the Dominican judges are very conservative. I think, though, what happened in that case when I did some preliminary research, that doctor should probably end up in prison because he's killed a lot of folks, and apparently he's gotten away with it, tragedy. So folks, do not consider doing any surgical procedure in a foreign country. It's a deadly idea. Please, please, don't even consider that. Well, thank you, caller, for calling in. Thank you very much. Now, one other question. Pierre asked, what if you can't afford the procedure here? Actually, you can. Most of the time, you can work out payment plans, and the cost of medical care based upon insurance rate is less than usually about 25%. So even if they quote a rate of $20,000, the insurance reimbursement is never more than maybe $4,000 or $5,000. So you may be able to get part of that done through your health insurance by making it a medically necessary procedure. And that's what you fight to do, because a lot of the procedures, for example, when people have type 2 diabetes and they're overweight, the surgical procedure to help them lose weight also get rid of the diabetes or help with the high blood pressure. So you make an argument and try to get your insurance company to cover it, please. Okay, now moving forward, I have an historic figure with me today, Attorney Milton Grimes. He represented Rodney King in that beating case in LA. And what was significant about that is that we just had the 30-year anniversary of the Rodney King case in the riot. That riot resulted in the worst riot in American history at the time. We had a bunch of deaths and 13,000 people arrested. We had thousands of folks that were injured, and it all emanated from the Rodney King case. Attorney Grimes, are you there? Okay, let me get, hey, Milton, Attorney, yeah. Rodney King case, that was a historic case, Attorney Grimes. Tell us about that case. What happened?
Well, I hope I can tell you without interruption by the announcement system on the train. I am riding the train from LA to San Diego. I'm getting out of LA because it may blow up again. No, that was supposed to be funny. But anyway, it was a historical case. I was proud to be involved in that case, and we successfully prosecuted the civil rights case for Mr. King. He got
Hey, can you hold the mic back a little bit?
Settlement for $3,816,535.42. But Nate, it was the end. It was the end of the line for police brutality when that verdict came back. I don't know if you remember where you were or not. I remember where I was when I heard it, and it was an awful, awful feeling. It was a sickening feeling. It was like Black lives don't matter. That was how that verdict felt. That's what it said.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last call for Amtrak 564. Last call being cleared. Doors are closing.
Yes. So in essence, the stage was so we could refresh recollection, because Attorney Grimes, we have a lot of young folks that listen to our show. In essence, the Rodney King case started because a severe police beating of Mr. King, a person captured on video. Tell us about that. The guy who captured that beating on video, what about that video production? Was there anything unusual about that?
Well, you know, that video is shown off and on some of the rap songs. So I think our young people are more familiar with it than maybe not the details of it. But it took place with a gentleman who heard some noise outside of his window and had just purchased a camera that day and decided to film where the noise was coming from. And he filmed history. For the first time, we had proof of what many African-American men were saying to lawyers. I've had several of them in my office back in that day saying the police had beat them and called them the N-word, but you couldn't take the case because there was no evidence. There was no proof of it. And finally, we had the proof. Finally, I call it the Loch Ness Monster, that mysterious monster in the lake in Ireland. We finally caught the police beating this Black man. That's what was a historical moment about it, Mr. Holliday. But the jury in Simi Valley, where there is a retirement community for policemen, pretty much, they decided that the officers were not guilty of a crime, that the officers acted in response to their fear. They feared Mr. King was a PCP crazed monster, and they convicted him. Later, a year after that, the case was prosecuted criminally again in the federal courts in Los Angeles, and 2 of those 4 officers were found guilty and sentenced to 30 months in prison. Today, rather than just the 4 officers being prosecuted, after the George Floyd case, there is a movement around the country for even the officers who stood by. Or in the King case, there were 27 officers out there, and none of them stopped that beating. Today, hopefully, they would be prosecuted for not doing their duty. That's a little change that has taken place over the years, but a lot of things have not changed, such as the attitude of officers. I don't think we've done enough, Nate.
Well, the problem is that we've seen the proliferation of the issue of qualified immunity that have acted as a shield to protect officers from egregious misconduct. And because of that, the issue becomes, how do you get justice? Because when you file a lawsuit particularly with the newer judges, it's just very difficult to get past summary judgment now, even in the worst case scenario. But let's talk about the other aspect about that. You say there's 27 officers out there, it's caught on video. And but how does the case in LA get moved to Simi Valley in the first place? How did that occur?
Because the prosecutor fell asleep at the helm. They said, well, they could get a fair trial for the people in any county that the case was moved to. And they didn't oppose Simi Valley. They let the defense lawyers, who were quite experienced defense lawyers in representing police officers, that's what they specialized in. And they knew that the Simi Valley community was very friendly towards police officers. I have been in seminars and doing seminars with John Barnett in particular, one of the attorneys in that Rodney King case. He represented one of the officers, and we gave a seminar together once, and he said to the audience, you know, Milton, on an average, when I go to court, my client is presumed innocent. He's a police officer, and that's the law. But typically, when you go to court and you represent a citizen, they are presumed guilty. That's the different standard when they go to court. So officers get that break, the presumption of innocence. I mean, it's like a double presumption from what I've observed. It's hard to convict an officer. So it was a mistake on the part of the LA prosecution, the district attorney's office, not to propose going to Simi Valley. I don't know if it was being cavalier or on their part. It surely should not have gone to Simi Valley because where the officers stand was at the beginning. So it was a mistake, Nate.
Well, the other part about that is that I thought, okay, one of the things I learned is that I played golf out in Simi Valley, and that's the location of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley. But the other thing that I noticed, after the election 2020, or I was out there right before, and there were Trump signs everywhere. So LA went 85% for Biden, but in Simi Valley, I saw these Trump signs everywhere. It just was startling. And so it's not only that you have a different in terms of demographic, in terms of race, but politically, that area was really bizarre. They were very strong for Trump. And so it was odd. I saw a sign, Biden lies. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? And it was just a crazy thing to see that in California. And I did not recognize or appreciate the fact that you had community with that much conservatism, I guess.
Yeah, I went out there for the first time in my life for George Floyd March in 2020. And I said, let me see what is in Simi Valley. I've never been there, never wanted to go there because I knew it was very white and very conservative. And I remember the King verdict coming out of there. So I went out there, and the mayor pro temp, the day before that march, that protest march for George Floyd, had gone on the media and said that he hoped that he could get the human waste department, the sanitation department, to spray the marches with water from the sewage. They bring out a big truck with a pressure hose and spray the marches. And I said, this man is crazy. He later retracted that, but that was his attitude, that if the protesters come to Simi Valley, they should be sprayed with waste water. So we went there, and surprisingly enough, Nate, there were very few African Americans in that march. And we were marching on the sidewalk, and cars were going up and down the street, blowing their horns and tooting and acting wild, and people hanging out the windows and yelling. And at first, my reaction was, this might not be safe for my daughter that I had brought along with me at the time. She was 18. And the people were yelling, though, in support of the marches. I was shocked. And I saw an older white man leaning, bending over on the sidewalk. And I stopped. I said, sir, are you okay? Because he had been marching. And he said, I'm fine, son. He said, I just had a couple of knee surgeries in the last couple of years, and I'm gonna have to just hold it here for a minute. I said, well, can I help you? He said, no, I want to stand right here. I'm okay. He said, because this has got to stop. I said, what? He said, this has got to stop. This racism has got to stop. And as I marched on, I became more interested in the attitude, especially of some of the older whites. So I stopped, and I saw this lady standing on the lawn. I said, ma'am, why are you standing out here? She said, I'm watching, ain't I? I said, yes, ma'am, but why are you watching? She said, because this has got to stop. I'm tired of it. Well, I said, you tired of what? She said, racism. This has got to stop. And as we marched on, my daughter touched me. She said, Dad, I was crying back there. I said, why? She said, it was just the mood I felt. I said, you know what? I have to admit, so was I. Water came to my eyes. It just felt different. It felt like people were supportive of us and tired. And it was coming from not just the older white people standing there watching that wasn't participating. It was coming from some of the young ones. So it gives me some hope that I'm not alone, and I'm hoping that we can get some change in this country, Nate. But it's going to take some fighting. It's going to take some standing up to injustice that I think you and I have to do in the courtroom and outside of the courtroom. But it does give me some hope.
And one of the things that I was concerned about is the fact that the more things change, we still see the same thing occurring over and over again. We've not solved this problem. The Rodney King case maybe highlighted one man's injustice, but that type of misconduct was prevalent in all the cities. And so the problem that we're faced with as a society is moving forward. How do we fix the problem? I've seen a number of police reforms that have been promulgated, but the problem is ultimately it's a human factor. Laws themselves don't make change, people do. And I know there was a lot of people that were disappointed in the fact that they did not pass the George Floyd Policing Act. What most people don't know is that we have all sorts of laws on the book already, all types of laws. Particularly, we have the 42 U.S.C. 1983 civil rights laws. We have civil and criminal laws on the book that can handle these. But it's not the laws that's the problem. It's the interpretation of these laws by the court. We have laws, and so for the folks who don't realize this, I know everybody wanted to say that they want to pass the George Floyd Policing Act, which I reviewed very briefly. And I'm thinking, okay, that law, if it's passed, is still dependent upon law-abiding police officers to actually promote and enforce the laws correctly. The laws on the books already requires that, but they're not legally interpreted. So Milton, one of the concerns I had is that we have legislation, but I don't think it's going to make a difference unless we change the fundamental aspect of how policing is done. The laws, in my opinion, are not going to change anything. What do you think?
I don't think the laws are going to change. You know, they just busted this sheriff in LA for hiding the fact that one of his deputies was kneeling on a suspect's neck in the lockup, where you have access to all the deputies you want. It was 3 or 4 deputies, and one of them had his knee on a suspect's neck for 3 to 4 minutes. This just happened after George Floyd. This just happened, and it was so ugly. The sheriff lied about when he was aware of it. He said he just became aware of it recently, wherein now one of his associates have said that's a lie. I brought this to his attention with the video a few days after it happened, and it happened like 8 or 9 months ago. So you're right. It's the people that have to change this thing. We got laws on the book, but when you have sheriffs and officers doing what just happened in the LA in the sheriff department, we still got a problem. It's the mentality. It's the attitude of the deputies and of their chiefs. They set the tone, and you surely can't set a good tone if you're going to cover up for your officers who still are kneeling, putting their knee on suspects' necks. That doesn't carry a good message for the public.
Well, I was curious. After that occurred, did it spark public outrage that lead to some type of accountability on the officer who engaged in that misconduct, or did he get away with it? Would the officer get away with that? would officer get away with putting his knee on the guy's neck, Milton? Can you hear me?
You're on mute, Attorney Grimes.
I said, would officer get away with that?
Communication, mate. Okay, I said, I haven't heard who the officer is yet. I'm sure he's not going to be exposed, but he wasn't going to be exposed if it had been up to the chief, to the sheriff.
So under California law, would that be a crime? Wouldn't that be a crime even under California law for him to engage in brutality like that? Not the federal law, I'm talking about the state law.
Heck, yeah, it's a crime. It's definitely a crime. But as you know, and I know, oftentimes they're not convicted, but they should at least, it's just like the 5 officers who killed my client in Englewood, shot this woman multiple times, over 13 times, and killed her boyfriend who was the driver of the car. They were fired from the Englewood Police Department. We just got a decision 2 weeks ago that the District Attorney's Office in Los Angeles County was not going to prosecute these officers. And I've asked the Justice Department to look into it because it was murder. It was murder. They had over an hour to get prepared for this couple, and they gunned them down. They gunned them down, mate. So yeah, it is against the law, but will he be prosecuted for assaulting this inmate? Who knows? He's going to have an explanation that he was in fear of his life. So who knows?
Well, then you got the secondary issues. You got his co-workers who probably saw what occurred and took no action to try to correct the problem. And so if we're consistent with the George Floyd recent decision, by the way, the George Floyd case is one of the first time that I've seen the secondary officers actually being prosecuted. I was trying to look for some other cases, but it's such a rare occurrence. I'm sure there's some somewhere, but I didn't find a lot of cases where you had the secondary liability of the bystander being prosecuted.
You know, Nate, I brought to the attention of the District Attorney's Office here, as well as the Justice Department, when I said, you guys need to look into this. There's a prosecutor in Indianapolis that maybe y'all should talk to. I was on a radio program with him, and his attitude and his policy is 6 months. He brings them to justice in 6 months, he says, because the law is not going to change and the facts are not going to change. And you can get all those facts together within 6 months. So that's a reasonable time to utilize. You may be contacted, Nate, to help California learn how to do this thing.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have an outstanding prosecutor here in Marion County named Ryan Mears. And since I've been a lawyer, he's by far the most outstanding prosecutor we ever had. He's fundamentally fair, and he's trying to keep justice. And on an underfunded budget, I mean, their budget, we have an odd situation here. Our prosecutor and public defender budget is about the same, which I've never understood. You know, because you have private lawyers represent individuals, but somehow our politicians probably have people that are non-lawyers that are making these decisions that are probably not in the best interest of the community. But it doesn't take a person who's a lawyer to figure this out, that they probably should have a higher budget for the prosecutor's office, particularly now here in Indianapolis with we had the introduction of homicide on a regular basis. So you got to have more staff to make sure the people that are committing those type of violent crimes are correctly punished. Because as citizens, we want to live in peace no matter what community we live in. And now, but the departing shot on this Rodney King case, though, is that after this verdict in Simi Valley, California, there was such a public outcry. There were riots everywhere, and it led to over $1 billion in destruction of property there in LA. And then I would look at the numbers here, it was just startling to me. They had over 66 people were killed. They had over 5,000 injuries and over 12,000 arrests. And this process was repeated in many cities across the country. There was a lot of people involved in riot because the very thought of the police officers who committed the crime to get away with it was appalling. Yet, we saw an historical change. We saw in the George Floyd case that for the first time I can recall in a long time, we saw accountability. So there is hope that there is justice and accountability in these type cases. One of my concern is that we still have a significant issue involving racial profiling. And outside of Indianapolis, I get complaints all the time in terms of the racial profiling as the number of African Americans who are stopped for no reason and they fabricate charges. But in order to counteract that, I'll get Milton idea. I got some ideas as to what I think people should do when they're traveling to try to act as a deterrent to police misconduct. Hey, Milton, what is your idea of people who are obeying the law oftentimes get pulled over just because of their race? What precaution do you think they should take for those folks in order for them not to become a victim of police misconduct? What, if anything, you suggest they do?
Nate,
Yes.
our communication is getting worse because I'm getting further south and near the ocean and we don't have the tower. But I hope you can hear me. I have a thing about standing up and being who you are, no matter where you are, and in front, no matter who you're in front of. And I'm not for our people kowtowing to bully police officers. So I know there's a thing about you want to go home and you want to go home safely, and everybody does, but I think you always want to leave a situation respecting yourself as a man. And I used to tell my son this: be respectful, but you ain't got to kiss nobody's butt, even the police. So I say obey the directions of the officer. Don't try to have a trial out there on the streets. So you're going to lose because they got the power. They got the guns and they got the authority to shoot you. You don't have the authority to shoot them unless you have a serious case of self-defense and you got several videos around, because you won't win it in court. So, you got to deal with them. You got to answer some questions, not all questions, or you just tell them, hey, I want a sergeant out here, or I'm taking this position, but don't do it physically. So you're going to end up probably dead. So I have a sort of a mixed piece of advice to people, because I'm always for standing up for your rights, but you got to be careful how you do it.
Okay, here's some pointers that I think are relevant. Now, today, I think the Rodney King case taught us something very important. That is that video evidence is very important. So if you are stopped by a police officer, it's always a good idea to video the encounter and upload it right away to the internet so you have a permanent record. The second thing, always be very respectful. The third thing, if a police officer approaches your car, it's a good idea to put your hands on top of the steering wheel so they can see your hands, so they have no reason to pull their gun out. The fourth thing I think is a really bad idea that I see a lot of people, they say, officer, I got a gun in my car. I just think that's a terrible idea. Why do you think that you have to talk to the officer about having a gun in your car? It's not relevant. And, and then you then put the officer on the defensive, because now you have a loaded weapon and now he's got to also look at his weapon. So don't escalate the situation by talking about any gun. You got a gun in your car, the encounter should only take a minute or two and you'll be on your way. So don't escalate the situation. The fourth thing I think is important: don't try to call your friends on the phone to talk to them about what the officer's doing. Dumb idea. Just record the conversation between you and the officer, upload it on the internet. The fifth thing, always be polite, and be respectful. But on the other hand, don't get into a conversation about what you were doing. And the sixth thing is that sometimes they will ask you, could I search your car? Well, you need a search warrant to search somebody's car. And be respectful and say, officer, I don't desire you to search my car. I haven't done anything wrong. And to my understanding, you need a search warrant to do that. And so if there's nothing I've done, am I free to leave? And so you ask that politely, because as a practical matter, if you're recording it, then he will respond and say, yes, you can leave, or no. But they're entitled to you giving their identification and registration of the car. And so that's a legal requirement. But beyond that, you don't have to get into a diatribe as to what you're doing, where you're going, and all that. It's not. In other words, you don't have to disclose what you're doing to the police officers. Some people do that. They think that is productive. But if I ever get stopped, I just give them my name, my driver's license, my registration. And now, one of the things that people encounter, they'll come up to your car and say, oh, you know you're speeding? Your response will be what? Good afternoon, officer. How may I help you? It's a dumb idea, because now the body cam work two ways. Yeah, it can act as evidence against the officer, but also act as prosecution against you. So remember, and what I've discovered too in my litigation is that a lot of the officers have the cameras on their cars. And so from the time they activate their lights and sirens, the camera's on and it's filming everything. And we've been able to get that in discovery. Now, one final thought process here, Milton, because I was reading the newspaper, and the newspaper had erroneous quote about the King case. They say that they had a settlement. You had a trial in that case. Tell us about that trial real quickly that you conducted for Rodney King. That was a famous trial.
Yeah, this last statement. Yeah, it was a trial. It was a jury trial. It lasted 6 weeks. And the verdict in that trial was $3,800,500. A lot of respects, because the judge would not be cross-examining officers about who amplify the N-word, and you could hear it reverberate all around the courtroom. And then he allowed me to question the officers about their use of it while they were beating King. It just had a lot of emotional moments in it, Nate, and I always remember it. I always remember how the jury foreperson made me totally afraid throughout the whole trial, because she dressed very conservatively, and she became the foreperson and scared the hell out of me until, while the jury was out deliberating, found out from a reporter that she was the winner of this chapter of the Black Panther Party. And I was just elated with that fact that here I had a foreperson who was had that background. And I talked with her after that, and she said that she knew she had a destiny there when she got on that case. And her destiny was to make sure that this jury decided the right thing and do the right thing. And that's what her duty was. And she did that, even though the 3 white men on the jury said King shouldn't get anything because he started the altercation. And the 3 white women said, well, whatever y'all say. But that lady, she's was a Filipino. She's deceased now. And the 2 Latino jurors and the African-American woman said, no, this young man is going to get paid something. So they ended up with a quotient verdict, Nate, which is a verdict that's sort of illegal because it just adds up the sum total of everyone's, like in the white men, the zeros, along with the millions that the others said he should get, and then divided by the total number of jurors, 10, and that's how they came up with the $3,816,535.42. I asked her, how did you get 42 cents? She said, oh, that was just to make y'all think we work hard. But it just was a once in a lifetime experience. Yeah.
Well, that's a fascinating case.
So that's a
but-
quick synopsis of it.
Well, why did the case last 6 weeks though? That's an awful long jury trial. About how many witnesses?
Yeah,
did you put on?
because of the number, you know, that was the length of the trial. With actually tried 6 different cases. I had to try all of the complaints that King had encountered with law enforcement, his robbery conviction, and how that turned into a laughable situation when the facts were disclosed and exposed. It was like, wow, he pled to a robbery because he didn't have a competent lawyer. But it was him confronting a 145-pound clerk in a store over some Kool-Aid drink, some type of Kool-Aid drink. He couldn't get with the stamps that you give for food. And he just snatched his stuff and went out, and the guy ran after him, and he got a tire iron out of his car, and the guy took the tire iron from him, but yet he got convicted of robbery. With him almost running over some officers with his car. Turns out he thought the officers were robbers, and he didn't know they were police officers. That's why no charges were filed. So, but all those things had to be explained. And so it was some details in it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, now, we have started back here doing trials. And, I had a trial that was scheduled this week that got settled the last minute before the trial started. But it was interesting. Under rules of evidence, everything bad about my case, I was able to keep it out on Rule 403. And I'm really happy about that. And then that's why the case got settled, because everything that the defense thought was bad about the case, it went away. They had no case after the final court ruling on the issues. And I knew he wouldn't have a case, and he was going to get killed at trial. And so they paid exactly what we asked for, not a penny less, not one penny.
Good for you.
Because what we're doing now is that now that the courts open back up, it's been 2.5 years that things have been shut down since, about January, February of 2000. But it seemed like a lifetime. All these cases just been sitting around, no trials. And so now we can start back in the trial process. But going forward on this issue, one final thought process on this issue of police misconduct. You saw the George Floyd case, and they had one heck of a settlement. Do you think that's going to be a trend in the future, or we are not really improved a lot since King case? We got a couple of high-profile cases, people got paid, but is that the norm, or is that just the exception?
Well, I don't think that many figures in that neighborhood. I honestly don't. I think it was the 9 minutes of torture that this brother went through, and on public, display like that. But I think that I don't know. I think that the public has learned a lot about police behavior and police conduct, and they're more receptive to it to a degree. But I still also think that the majority of citizens believe that the police have certain liberties that everybody else don't have, and they are allowed certain, what do I want to use here? They're given certain excuses that the rest of the public don't have because they have such a difficult job. Yeah, they have a difficult job, but they still have rules they have to comply with. And it's just a mixed feeling that I have, Nate. But I don't think it's going to be the George Floyd amount of settlement anymore.
Okay, let's go to the line. We have a caller now. Caller, you have a question for us. Hello?
My question is, when we talk about violations of civil rights in litigation processes. Can an attorney that is representing a client, when the other side says, I need to extend the time, I'm not ready to go to court, can the attorney for that litigant say, that's okay, we'll grant you, we're all right with you not, asking for an extension on the case without telling the person that they represent? And if it was set for a jury trial, hasn't that person's civil rights been violated by that process of the attorney not making it aware that the other side said they wanted more time? Wasn't that the right of the litigant to say, yes, that's all right with me, without the attorney giving the okay and never telling the
Well, that's a good question. Here's how it works. During the last 2.5 years, we've been under General Order 17. And so all the cases have been continued. And because of that, it's not unusual for cases to get continued by lawyers now because there's been a significant backlog. So if you take the average litigation time before the pandemic to be about 30 months, you add on another 30 months. And so now the litigation goes up to 5 and 6 years. And so no matter what the attorney does, they're going to have duplicated things on their calendars. And so the lawyers have to work together, and a lot of them, they extend out. So the cases that are older, they try to get those first, but as a practical matter, it's not possible to do the trials in a timely manner under today's situation. It's just not possible. So to answer your question, yes, the attorney could do that, and it's done all the time, particularly now, but it has a lot to do with the pandemic in the sense that we're not able to do trials at all on a timely manner. It's just not possible. Thank you for calling. Next caller.
I understand that component in terms of what's going on because of the pandemic, but the lack of notifying the client about it, in addition to not doing any of the depositions on that person's witnesses or any of that, are we not looking at? And the trial was not allowed. Isn't and can attorneys sign everything without the litigants' permission to sign off?
Well,
So
Colin, I just answered you.
On that, as far as an attorney settling everything without without the litigant saying I'm in agreement to it. So I'll be listening. Thank you.
Okay. The answer is for the second time, yes, the attorney can do that because what the caller didn't understand, this is very important. You can't do the cases in a timely manner. It's not possible. The cases for the last 2.5 years have been backed up. And so because there's a significant backup of cases, so the cases that were set for trial in 2000 were the 2017, 2018 cases. And so what happened is, because there's a backup of cases, through no fault of anybody, but we had a pandemic where between 1 and 2 million people died and the courts got shut down. And so the lawyers are required to work together. So getting cases continued is not a big deal. We don't have a choice in the matter. Okay, next caller.
Hello, Nate.
Yes, sir.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's your question or comment, sir?
I think he though has a point, Nate, and that is lawyers communicate to their client what's going on and discuss it with them. And we make the ultimate decision on a lot of things, but sometimes good communication can solve the problem this lady here is expressing, and that is appearance of the lawyer deciding things without talking to the client or consulting with the client or explaining it to the client. And that would go a long ways in having some people not resent us so much and be angry with us, thinking that we're arrogant and do what we want to do with their cases if we just communicate with them. I think that's what her issue is.
Yeah. Okay, caller, you have a question or comment? Go ahead.
Oh,
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
yeah. I just wanted to say, I saw Rodney King's daughter, Laura, on Good Morning America yesterday. She seems very competent and her head on straight. Just wanted know if Attorney Grimes has been keeping up with her at all.
Okay. Hey, Milton, did you know Rodney King's daughter? Milton, can you hear me? He was talking about Rodney
can
King's
you hear me?
daughter. Yeah, do you know Rodney King's daughter? He
Yeah,
said she was on
I
Good Morning
met
America.
Laura on a program that we did about a year ago about Rodney King for the Trial Lawyers College, and she participated in that program. I understand that she has a nonprofit program that she tries to help people, the homeless, and does some stuff for the community. Yeah, but I've met Laura. We've talked before.
Okay.
Have her head on straight, so that's good news.
Okay.
Well,
Okay,
thank you very
guys,
much.
my communication is terrible. So I'm going to sign off, Nate.
Well, you're good. Well, thank you very
Okay.
much, Milton. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to our show today. I'd like for our callers, thank you for calling in today. And we thank you. We'll be back next week. We try to deal with current legal topics that are relevant to our community. If you haven't voted, if you live in Indiana, the voting I think is Tuesday. Make sure you go out and vote. We have contested primary, a lot of important election, and make sure you get in the habit of voting in all elections. Thank you, everybody, and may God bless and keep you. And don't forget, the virus is still out there, and so be safe, be careful. Take care. Goodbye.